Just took a tour.
It's 1500. We're convening the Templeton Community Service District Water and Wastewater Utilities Committee meeting. April 16th here.
All right, when Eric Barlow is expected to make it, but he'll be a few minutes late, so we would recommend just proceeding, and then he can join in when he arrives. You do have a quorum. So we do have quite a few couple items to go over today. The first being the water and wastewater master plan proposals, and Lori can provide us a short outline of what we've done to date and what we're prepared or what we hope we can accomplish during today's meeting.
Good afternoon. In your packet today or last week, there's a little memorandum at the beginning of quite a bit of information that was given to you that covered our original RFP as we had discussed previously with the items that we talked about including. We did end up extending the deadline about a week and a half to 4/4/25. And we ended up with 3 submittals and 2 which we shortlisted. Those consultants are Water Systems Consulting, or WSC, more commonly known as, and MKN and Associates, who are both here today with their teams. The proposals were also included in your packet for you to take a look at. Through the process, we had originally discussed doing more of an interview type scenario here at the committee meeting, but during the process of the RFP, we had some requests for kind of clarifying what that would look like. And so in one of the addendums, the question was that, holding interviews at a public meeting was unconventional. Typically, these kind of meetings are done in private with staff. And so they were requesting that they not be like an interview. So our response was that we're going to be holding, it's more of a presentation, 15-minute presentation on their proposal, limited to their proposal. And then there would be a 15-minute following for questions from the committee for clarifications. And then after that time, then we would, have a little more discussion following those presentations. So, what else would I need to bring up here? I think that would be it. We've invited WSC to go first in a few minutes. I don't know if you guys are ready. I don't want to throw you up there too soon, but did you guys have any questions about the process at this point?
No.
Any questions?
No. Thank you.
Okay. Heather's recovering from foot surgery, so if you don't mind, we'll just sit while we present, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
or
Is
the
it a
video?
camera?
So we have a camera that picks up from the podium, but it's not necessary that this be on camera unless it's.
Yeah, I think the presentation.
The presentation is what.
Yeah, we'll speak to the
Yeah.
presentation. And then we provided, you had asked for updated on the optional path, so we're providing a video for that.
Thanks much.
Okay. All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having us here today. We're pleased to be here and pleased to have this opportunity. A little unconventional, but that's okay. We can roll with that. Here's the agenda that we like to cover in our presentation. Really 5 points. First, we'll talk a little bit about the team that we're presenting to perform the work, to work alongside your staff. Second, we'll dive into our scope of work and what we define as optional tasks. And then we'll talk a little more about our approach. Then we will wrap up talking a little bit more about WSC and why we think you should select us. And then we'll save time for any questions that you might have. So in the room today, you have myself, Dylan Wade. I'm the principal in charge. of this project for WSC. What that means is it's my responsibility to make sure that I bring to you the right team and the right resources to meet Templeton's goals. And that starts really with having a strong project manager. So Heather Freed is one of our best planning project managers, and let her introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. I'm Heather Freed. I've got 9 years of experience, as water resource engineer, predominantly in water wastewater planning. I've worked on, 10 master plans and then a dozen more modeling and CIP planning projects. And then as project manager, my role is really to, be the primary point of contact with your staff, manage our team and technical progress, manage our scope, schedule budget, and making sure we bring in our QC reviewer at the right time so that we can maintain high quality deliverables.
So just touching briefly on our master planning expertise, this was covered in our proposal as well. But this is really the bread and butter of the type of work that WSC does. We are doing planning work for agencies all around you. So to the north, Heather is the district engineer for San Miguel Community Services District. We're providing program management and planning support to the city of Atascadero on their wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So this is the work that we do routinely. We're headquartered here in San Luis Obispo, and we have a ton of experience with local agencies performing this kind of task. So here's the team that we've proposed. We've proposed kind of a lean and mean team to deliver the work. So myself, principal in charge, Heather Freed is your primary point of contact and project manager. Rob Morrow will be providing QAQC. He's our planning lead for the water systems consulting. And then we have a staff person, Chris Meljon is working currently alongside district staff on the Noscano turnout and relocating that to the Creekside project. So he'll be leading the water system. Kendall Houghton is a wastewater treatment engineer in our office, delivered the Cayuga Sustainable Water Project with me. She'll be leading your wastewater treatment. And then Adam Donald is our collection system lead. Heather, I'll turn it over to you to talk about scope.
Yeah, thanks. So here's our, proposed scope and optional task. I just want to start that, we want to be responsive to you in the RFP. There was a lot in the scope. And we took a slightly different approach where we instead pulled out some of the scope and said, this is our base scope, and we want to focus on this to really get you a comprehensive CIP. So that way you can initiate your rate study. And we pulled out some of these pulled out some of the tasks and made them optional to really try to better fit your budget. Some of the changes we're recommending in this base scope would be slightly lower level analysis on our demand and flow projection updates, where you're relying on some of your previous planning reports. The capacity assessment, we're going to rely on the 2013 master plan, reevaluate some of those projects instead of reinventing the wheel. But we do want to focus on condition assessment, since that was not in the 2013 master plan, as well as the wastewater treatment system analysis, since that's going to be one of your largest programs. So we want to make sure we set that up for success. And then I'm going to cover in a couple future slides why these specific tasks we made optional. And then also you requested the fee for the option tasks. We passed that out, a little summarized version, but if you need a more detailed breakdown, just let me know. All right, so focus condition assessment. Like I mentioned, this was not in the 2013 master plan, so we really want to make sure that that's captured here. It includes two parts. The first would be a desktop analysis and pulling together your asset management information. So this could be pipe age, material. We definitely want to get operators' input and maintenance history, any sort of historic information, so that way we can document that and incorporate that into the analysis and use that information to develop cumulative pipeline end of useful life curves with replacement strategies. This would be setting up an annual R&R budget, so that way you have that in your budget for when you need to start replacing your pipelines. And then we're also going to do focused site visits at your wells, tanks, lift stations. We have, condition assessment forms that we use at these site visits, where we go through each component at each of these facilities, take photos, document the condition, score them, and incorporate that, and incorporate your operators' information. You guys know your system best, so really document that, and then use that to build condition-based projects for your CIP. So here's an example of a CIP that, come out of this project. In this one, we're grouping, capacity, condition, and annual replacement budgets by priorities. We've got like an A priority, B priority, C priority. This can be nice, so that way staff can kind of customize when they want to start a project within, an A category or a B category, if you have the budget and the staff time to do it. Another way that we've built these CIPs is we laid out each project over the 20-year planning horizon. That could be nice because then we can manage annual capital expenditures to really fit, your rates and your budgets. We can also spread things out longer to sort of manage any rate increases if that was needed. But, overall, there's different ways we can do it, and we want to collaborate with you and your staff to make this, something that's most useful for you. And then we're also going to prepare CIP project sheets that really include all the information on the project, in one place. So that way, 5 years down the road, maybe you've got new staff on board and you need to start implementing a project, you can pull out this project summary sheet. It's got everything you need, why this project, where it's located, preliminary costs, so that way you can get the ball rolling. Here is our proposed schedule. It's streamlined schedule. We've got 10 months from kickoff to a final CIP that you can roll into your future rate study. And that's really because we've got, our water, wastewater treatment, and collection system analysis ongoing at the same time under our 3 technical leads. We've also got strategically placed workshops with your staff to really go through each of the steps. We want to collaborate with you and your staff. This is, this sort of project's a good time to document institutional knowledge. You guys know your system best, and incorporate your input, feedback into the CIP and make sure, your needs are met. And then this is, an example of work plan and kind of that you could develop coming out of this project. So, you start with your master plan and your CIP. That's going to feed into your rate study. And then from there, you can really program in some of your future work and some of your big programs and projects. This is conceptual, we'll refine something like this through the project and kind of help program some of these projects. And then I also want to point out that some of our optional tasks from the scope of work are shown here. And these ones we've specifically, highlighted that we think you can defer them to save potential rework in the future and just better align it with other ongoing projects. So, for example, the space needs and the staffing needs of the wastewater treatment plant, you could defer that, at a later time when you're doing more facility planning. Once you have a better understanding of what your wastewater treatment plant upgrade is really going to look like, we could do it now, but if there's changes, you might have to redo some of that work. So that's why that one's in our optional task. Some of the hydraulic modeling updates, we're showing that pushed out a little bit and aligning with the Creekside project. So that project is going to have significant impact on how you operate your water system. And so you're going to need to do some hydraulic modeling as part of that project. So we're pushing that out a little bit to align it. And then you can recalibrate your model once that project's online and operational. And then another one would just be, sewer collection system CCTV. That can be a staff intensive project if you're managing contractor, if you're gonna do the sewer cleaning before. So that's another one where we're like, we could program this out so that way it better aligns with both your budget and your expense.
So just to recap, as we thought about Templeton and we reviewed your existing budgets and we thought about your current circumstances, you guys have some big things coming. The biggest of which is your wastewater treatment plant improvements. That's likely to be the largest capital project that you've ever invested in as a community services district. So our whole thought process, you've all heard of the analogy of like filling a jar. We think of the jar as your rates and your budget. So we want to make sure that we get the big things in there first. So let's make sure we have the right size jar that can cover and really program out those wastewater treatment improvements. That's going to be your biggest rock. You have a pretty big project coming with Creekside improvements. So we wanted to make sure that let's get that in there next. And then we'll come back in over time programmatically and fill in the details with all of the additional data collection on CCTV, with refining projects as we're implementing so that we can create efficiency and save time and money. So some of the benefits from that approach is we really are able to accelerate the schedule. Our plan is to get you into a place where by next fiscal year, so 26, 27, you can be implementing a rate increase and aligning your rates with your future needs as quickly as possible. By doing that, it avoids having to take a big step and allows you to start kind of planning and programming for your rates as you go. It also lets us basically pace the work to match your staff availability. So we know you guys are a lean and mean organization. If we're doing CCTV of all of your system, for example, there's a ton of cleaning, there's a ton of encroachment permit work that needs to go along with that. So we need to make sure that we're not pulling your staff away from their regular duties, that we're programming out the work so that they can keep the wheel spinning here and then also accomplish all this investigative work that we want to get done. And then furthermore, like Heather said, we basically get to integrate with your project. So by doing the water modeling, when you're bringing Creekside online and looking at water quality there in that blend, and how you're stuffing that into your distribution system, then that's the right time to do the water modeling because you'd have to do it then anyway. So we've really tried to streamline, align, and take care of the big rocks first in our approach, and then fill in the details in a controlled, programmatic, and intentional fashion. So why choose WSC? We are a trusted local partner. We're working with district staff on the Nosmenta Turnout Project. We were able to get a grant by working closely with your staff in the county, so that that's not coming out of your budget, it's coming out of FEMA funds. We have a deep understanding and experience. We do this type of planning work all up and down, all over the county. We're working for agencies to the north and to the south of you. And then we really think that this phased approach that we've provided will allow us to optimize the value to the district and let you kind of intentionally make those investments in collecting data that you need and in planning for those big projects that are coming. With that, we'd be happy to take and answer any questions that you might have.
Could we have another copy perhaps of the
Yes.
option
Yes.
that we can provide? Thank you.
Questions? I think we had, I mean, I had a couple, so one, getting the breakdown of these optional costs is helpful to put it in context. But the proposal you submitted and the timeframe submitted doesn't really include the optional the optional tasks. So is it, assuming we were gonna pick up some of those or plan for some of those as a part of this initial effort, what does that do to the project schedule?
It's a great question. If we included all the project optional tasks, we could meet the schedule you put in the RFP. So we would make that commitment. Depending on the tasks that we added and how we wanted to program them out, they would tend towards extending the schedule. There's one, like our first optional task is the, writing up of the plan itself and giving you a nice written document. That wouldn't add any time. It would allow us to get that CIP done in that same amount of time. And then maybe a month or 6 weeks for the writing and review of that report. So, really our goal was, let's not miss a fiscal year in terms of letting you adjust your rates and start collecting monies for those large future capital projects.
Yeah, sorry for being late. My name is Eric Mormon. I'm the local resident here, and I'm not a expert on water master plans, but I'm a contractor, and I'm with the capital improvement plan. I think that's really good, and that's part of your base contract work. You were mentioning that with that, there's obviously some large undertaking coming, and are you with that or in any of these options? Would you be a support or wanting to help like take on the design or maybe some like owners representative portions of that work? Because you guys being the expert, and I'm not saying that necessarily the
Yeah.
CSD wants to do that, but it would be just something that it's always good to get an expert who made the plan to be involved in the discussion of the execution of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll let you answer that actually.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, I mean, right now, this is just a master plan, so
Absolutely.
right now, we're just high-level planning analysis, trying to figure out what's the solution at the wastewater treatment plant, like, you've got this new permit coming up, your current pond plant can't meet it, you're gonna have major upgrades. And so kind of like laying out those options and getting some preliminary budget and laying out, yeah, what's the plan, what's the first step there? Do your alternatives analysis, figure out your treatment technology, get all the projects you need and line it out, and then design comes at a later time. So I think, this is really the beginning planning steps.
Sure.
I'll add to that though. Some of these projects, of course, we're a full service water wastewater engineering firm. My preference is to take projects from concept into operation. So we provide support from plan development all the way into helping turn valves and run equipment if needed. The way that we structure this, there may be certain these tasks that go to other firms. You may hire another firm to deliver the Creekside project. Some of these will couple closely with those other projects, and you want to be able to preserve that relationship, whether we were doing the work or whether you had somebody else do it. So yes, we can and would love to support you through all of the kind of project elements. But as you get into implementation, for example, on CCTV, once we set up that first contract, it's very likely, Justin's super confident, his team could probably take over doing those contracts on an annual basis. So we would be there to support you, but you guys would ultimately make the decision about what work you want to pull us in on.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm familiar with options or add alts to projects. If for some reason the district, let's say they wanted all of them,
Yep.
is there a savings by executing all the work because we're giving you a lot more work? Because obviously you have to treat each of these as their own option. But if for some reason we wanted to execute 3 options and you're able to do the work concurrently, would there be a cost savings on that?
Where I think you'd get a bigger cost savings, kind of what we were, as we thought through this, like for the facilities planning on the wastewater plant, it's likely that you're gonna wind up with a higher level of treatment than you currently have. That's gonna mean more operational staff. So if we went out there today and said, okay, well, here's your current space needs, we might have to rework that a year or 2 down the road once we figure out that here's the treatment process that you're using and the staffing that we're using. So we actually think the most efficient path and process is to defer some of these tasks, even though it means more work for us. Potentially, we'd really much rather structure it so that you guys get the benefit of aligning those at the natural timing and in conjunction with the projects that are gonna really lead those efforts. So, not a lot of savings to be had by doing it all up front. There's some risk of, we get 2, 3, 4 years down the road as we actually move into implementation of some of these projects. And you're gonna get much better definition of them the closer you get to implementation. So we wouldn't we really wouldn't recommend doing it all now. And then frankly, a small team like you have, trying to do it all now will feel overwhelming.
Absolutely, but would it be one of those things because we have it now that they could put them as options in the contract and that would lock in the value of them now?
Yeah,
even
we
if they
would
wanted
do
to
that.
execute the work in 5 years from now, or whatever that is.
Yeah, we would happily do that.
Okay, makes sense.
A follow-up question, talking about developing the CIP list and you're also saying some of this stuff would be deferred. I'm kind of curious regarding the wastewater treatment plant, analysis or assessment. And what you write in like providing recommendations for addressing the issues, for the current plant treatment capability and for meeting future requirements. So if that, I need to understand a little bit more behind what's gonna go into that and how we're gonna get a robust CIP list to be able to base the rate study on if we don't kind of go into a little more depth into these potential possible directions and getting costs for those. Cause it seemed a little brief in here, so I just want to understand what you guys were kind of
Yeah.
bringing to that.
So this is a little piece of work that we've done to support another agency where we've looked geographically from Greenfield in Monterey County to Santa Maria and Santa Barbara County. So these are all the recent relevant wastewater treatment plant projects. And so we've developed a cost curve. So you can say, okay, what's my flow? Your flow is going to be about a half MGD. Then we can tell you that your costs are going to be this. And we can get you to essentially classify a cost estimate very quickly. So to support the kind of CIP planning, we won't be 100% right on day one. Nobody can be and nobody would be. But we can get you close enough that you can start accumulating the rates and programming that work in time. And then on the treatment plant, we could talk for an hour about that permit. There's a lot to uncover there. The good news for you guys is you don't have your letter of enrollment yet. So they haven't started your timeline. Once your timeline starts, you guys have 2 years baked into that permit. Essentially, it's a free 2 years to come into compliance. Well, we know that most likely you guys won't be able to meet that timeline because there's some challenging issues, particularly with salts. So what we would do then is we would take at year one, basically of your time schedule in that permit, you have to write them a letter that says we're not going to make it within the 2-year time frame. They're offering a 5-year time schedule order, kind of easy to get, and then potentially a second one. So from where we sit right now, we could be as far as 12 to 13 years away from having to construct those improvements on the wastewater facility. And then you'll want to use that time. Nobody has really successfully negotiated the salts requirements yet. We're working on that right now for Atascadero, and also for other agencies. San Miguelito in the southern part of the county also has salts concerns. We're really going to want to use that time, and we've done some clever phasing on the Atascadero project, to use that time to let us work with and engage with the regional board on how we solve salts without having to go through an expensive construction of an RO. So what we can do though is get you a pretty close cost per gallon that we can program into your CIP and then roll that into your rates. And then as the program moves along, we get more definition. Our estimates will get better and more accurate. But at this point, any consulting firm isn't going to have a super accurate estimate because there's just not a lot of definition on the program. And you don't want to overly define the program right now either, because you're really going to be negotiating with the regional board, for the next couple of years, trying to figure out what really are they going to make you do in terms of salts. So that's how we would approach this. Is we would get you kind of really close now. And then over time, as we refine this, then, your rates can only last for 5 years for Prop 218 anyways. So you're going to want to come back in 2031 and set rates again. And then that will push you closer to the actual delivery or start time of your construction on that wastewater plant. So that was kind of the whole crux of our approach is let's get you really close now. And then we'll refine by collecting all this data and programming all this work in over the next few years. And then we're gonna come back in on the next one and be, you know, even more accurate.
With the state's legislature around water and it changing pretty dramatically quickly, is there any risk for the district to get close now? And is there any like challenges they may face? And then maybe this is just for my own
Yeah.
thoughts here, but like, you know, okay, you're gonna defer some stuff, we're gonna kind of get close. Is the state gonna be like, hey, we told, and I don't know all the rules, hey, we told you need to hit these thresholds, well, you got close, and maybe that's better than all the other communities around here, I'm not sure. What's the risk in that? Cause obviously with this, the district is spending a lot of money to update this plan, and then obviously we have to go execute the work within that plan. But is it worth getting closer or better now to avoid any potential issues down the road?
Yeah, it's a great question. The salts issue is so expensive to deal with. It would really, the only effective way to remove salts at this point is construction of an RO facility. You know, the commitment we've made to Atascadero, we're gonna try to avoid that at all costs. And so we're using the time and the structure of the permit. I don't think there's a lot of risk in that the permit is structured to give you some time already. And then all the meetings that we've had in regional board staff, we've had probably 8 or 10 meetings with them on this same permit that you guys have. They've told us that they will grant a minimum of 1 and potentially 2 5-year time extensions. So they're, and they've told us also that they're gonna try, they want to avoid RO, but they haven't told us how to get there yet. So there is risk always. The biggest risk in terms of kind of any kind of delay is really, in this environment, has been inflationary risk. And so from our perspective, that's really why you want to get started early on aligning your rates to be in alignment with these big projects that are coming, is to reduce your risk of having to do really large or huge kind of unpalatable step increases later for your community. So we think our approach de-risks what are your biggest risks. Granted, anytime you're delaying, you know, doing work, yeah, it's always better to have all the data up front. But that puts you in a spot too where it's hard to collect all that data. It's expensive to collect all that data, and then it creates the risk of rework. So we've really delivered what we think is the optimal approach for your circumstance.
No, that makes sense. And with that, obviously technology is always changing and, you know, reverse osmosis is super expensive because it's a lot of power demand. Are there just, and maybe this is just a different question, and maybe it's something for us to think about, new technologies that are on the horizon, like multi-effect distillation through some sort of solar, or whatever that ends up being, that's maybe a more cost-effective solution that would, and this is just a generic question, but is there anything that you know of now that, you know, because the salt issue is a big issue, I'm guessing a lot of people are putting a lot of effort into it. Maybe in 5 years' time, there's something that we all think is gonna be the magic thing and it'll take care of it. And I guess I'm just asking for my own.
Yeah, it is a good question. There's a lot of development there. There's nothing on the horizon that I think is gonna like be the silver bullet or the magic wand. The approach that we're taking, so just your south of Atascadero's got the exact same issue that you guys are gonna have here, where they're program managers. The approach that we're taking there is everything we can do that's non-RO based. So we're looking at the recycled water and the location and use of recycled water. We're looking at water softener ordinances. So can you keep some of the salt from going in? So we're really trying to optimize around absolutely everything that we can that is non-RO based at this point. Of course, the longer we push out that sort of requirement, then the more likely is that there is some technology that comes along and helps or solves part of the problem.
Okay, I think that's a question I have.
I had another question about the other items that were kind of on the optional list that we would probably want to include in the CIP, like the facilities planning aspect. You know, you kind of were talking about looking at some regional numbers. Would you be able to do something like that for those items so that we could get that also? Because, you know, we're kind of looking at a funding crunch on all sides, wastewater. So yeah, I was a little curious about that and how if we didn't, you were talking about going to back for another rate increase in 2031. But obviously wanting to get ahead of that as well. So I'm kind of curious how you guys were gonna approach that.
Yeah, I can go.
I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one in particular, like the staffing needs, the sizing of your, facilities and stuff, we were like, we can defer this till we know kind of what the plan is gonna look like. How big is it? How many staff are you gonna need? We can make some preliminary estimates now, though, to build that into your budget. And, I think our treatment plant, analysis fee is maybe it's a little low for what you were anticipating, but we're really gonna rely on a lot of the other work we're doing in the county. Like at Atascadero and San Miguel and San Miguelito, who are facing the same problem, who have a pond treatment plant that are getting enrolled in this general permit. And so we have a lot of this background information, knowledge on the general permit, sort of the other local solutions around the county. And so we can, we're gonna incorporate our past work on that and our experience there and bring that to your master plan. So if we wanna look at sizing of facilities, and some of that stuff, we can get some preliminary estimates, based on some of our previous work and pull that into your master plan. So that way you at least got a budgeted line item. Maybe it's not super defined, but you can build it into your rates now, and then you can, refine that as you go.
I would just like to, thank you, for your proposal and for coming today to, present. Jeff was already had a question about schedule, and when you add in some of those optional items, appreciate the supplemental information. When you add in some of those optional items, how does that change the schedule? From the first
Yeah.
proposal, and then, as Lori was just asking about the treatment plant and what level of evaluation, analysis, assessment is going into the treatment plant so that you get an estimate for the CIP. And I think that you answered that as well. That was another question that I had. You answered that as well. You have a lot of data from other projects, projects, entities you've been involved with in the county locally, and you'd be using that information as well. So that was more or less, that was my questions.
Super. So
Thank you guys.
Of course.
if the committee members don't have any other questions, we want to again express our thanks to WC, and then if you're ready, ask NKN to they come with a presentation as well, and that we would follow that presentation with an Q&A.
No, or have any questions? Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very
We'll
much.
come back in for the discussion, but I wanted to give them we don't want to sit in and, make funny faces when they get.
Out there, would you-
Yeah.
They didn't make any funny faces.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Eileen Shields, and I'm a principal engineer in our San Luis Obispo office. And we're very excited to be here. We really appreciate the opportunity, and I acknowledge that you all put a lot of time and effort into this RFP and process. This is a critical project for the district. We're taking it very seriously. I worked very closely with Henry Leong, who's our proposed project manager, to assemble the right team and develop our approach. Unfortunately, and it's never a desire, but he couldn't be here today. As you know, a lot of school districts are on spring break right now, and he had prior commitments that he couldn't rearrange, though he really did try to. However, I have other members of our core team here. With me are John Hamlin and JJ Reichmuth. They're both principal engineers out of our San Luis Obispo office. We have Julie Garofalo and Dave O'Rourke, who are hydrogeologists with GSI Water. We planned a brief presentation to convey our experience and recommended project approach. There's a lot more detail in our proposal. We're only highlighting some of our key points, but we're happy to address any questions you might have at the end. At this time, I'm gonna pass it to John, who's gonna talk about our firm experience.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. So MCAN was formed in 2012 after most of us serving for about 15 years at other firms here in San Luis Obispo County, focusing on engineering, design, and planning on the Central Coast. We started MCAN off small so that we could maintain kind of our specific focus on water, wastewater planning and design. Over time, we've grown. We're now at over 80 staff in 8 offices throughout California. And this gives us a wealth of individuals to pull from to ensure that we meet projects on time and on budget. There was some questions earlier about costs. A large portion of our work is design and construction related. So this allows us to be able to provide really good cost estimates, especially at the planning level. I think if you look at local projects over the past 5 years locally, and you look at what they became or what they were estimated at the planning level and what the construction cost ended up being, you'll see a pretty big jump there. So our experience hopefully will avoid that. So we continue to maintain a really tight focus on water and wastewater services. And by focusing on this specialty, we typically have lower overhead and lower billing rates than our competition. So we're able to provide a technical level of service comparable to national firms, but at an excellent value. So our team has over 20 years of experience with Templeton. As a firm, one of our first projects with the district was in 2014 when we were asked to come in and step in and complete the hydraulic models when the district was in a position where they had to complete the previous master plan in-house. We're proud of our relationships with the district and with the relationship that we've built over the years. And this is important because your district has probably more complications per capita than most other agencies of similar size. You've got groundwater and groundwater recharge, you have iron and manganese and arsenic and all that good stuff. You have basin limits, we talked about a little earlier, the salt plan, that's a big deal. You have permitting complexities, the upcoming general permit for the wastewater plant, perk pond issues, high strength wastewater, and lots of industrial users. So it's a complicated climate, and as Eileen mentioned, this project has been years in the making. We've been talking with staff about it for years, and it's important that the district not rely too heavily on past information. We have a different philosophy than we heard earlier, and we disagree with the sort of quick and dirty approach to get to cost very quickly. We think there's a risk there with having the wrong costs based on the wrong information. And we feel that now is the time to really undertake a comprehensive plan based on current conditions, on current goals, and current regulatory requirements, which will ultimately be the basis for your utility rates and 20 years of construction projects. This effort should be more than a CIP. It should be a comprehensive master plan. So this slide shows the individuals on our team. I think a unique aspect of our team is that JJ, Henry, Eileen, and I have all worked together for over 20 years. We're kind of a known quantity. We work together well and we like working together. We've arranged our project team so that at least one of us is on each major element of this project, supported by multiple engineering staff. We think this project needs more than just
a few civil engineers. Our team's understanding of the goals and challenges and kind of the interconnection of the various aspects of the district's needs allows us to start work immediately without additional burden on staff. You know, that's always a challenge and will allow us to progress efficiently without a whole lot of guidance from staff. So, as I've been saying, this is a complicated project. It's more than just a capital improvements program. And it's a time where the district has the opportunity to invest in developing a comprehensive plan. It'll be the first master plan of this level in decades for the district. It requires a team of specialists. We responded to the RFP by coordinating a group of specialists in each of these individual areas. Includes hydrogeology, SCADA, grant funding support, inspection, architecture, flow monitoring, and inspection. And I wanted to highlight specifically a few of our partners that we think brings additional advantage to the district, and that's Julie Garofalo and GSI, who are currently working on the Platts deep well replacement, and we've worked with them on the Platts river well pre-design project. Owen Cubitt from Provo and Pritchard, who was the author of your latest urban water management plan, and John Robinson, who has helped his client secure over $550 million of grant funding. So we're really excited about this team. We're confident that the resultant master plan will be a high level of quality and professionalism. And for the opportunity, I'm going to hand it back to Eileen.
All right, thanks, John. So based on our experience with the district's water and wastewater systems, we know a thorough evaluation and a comprehensive master plan is needed to allow the current staff, the current board, to review and prioritize projects based on today's needs. We fundamentally disagree with preparing a CIP as quickly as possible. I think it's really important to base these decisions on accurate information. We strongly recommend updating flow estimates based on current growth projections and calibrating the sewer model using flow meters within your system. The detailed evaluation that's included in our proposal will roll into a master plan that provides a complete picture of the district's water and wastewater systems, lays out the recommended CIP based on current information and accurate projections, and provides realistic costs. So this in turn can be used to establish rates that will support the district's actual needs into the future. So as you saw earlier, we've done dozens of master plans. Through that process, we've developed a collaborative and a phased approach that helps ensure engagement with overly stressed staff resources. We'll coordinate and lead 5 workshops at key milestones to review results and collect input. And we know that staff time is limited. So we're going to provide digestible chunks to sections of the report as deliverables to ease the time commitment required from staff. And at the end, the district is provided with a full master plan report that summarizes the evaluations, the alternatives, and the recommendations, and provides project costs. So next, I want to hit on a couple of the more important components of the work. So one, and the last presenter talked about it briefly, but it's your wastewater treatment plant facility plan. So you were required by the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board to apply for a new discharge permit. That application was submitted in June of 2023, and as you probably know, you're still waiting. We know it's coming any day now. We just don't know when. We also know what it's going to require because it's a general order that's being applied to multiple municipal dischargers across the region. So we can anticipate those requirements. And it's going to include limits that the existing facility cannot meet. And as you know, the salts and the nitrogen limits are the main concern with this general order. So we've seen a few ways that agencies seem to be getting in trouble with this general order. One is they wait too long. Then they end up falling behind, which ends up requiring more time and cost. Or two, they move straight to advanced treatment right out the gate. So this means a membrane bioreactor followed by reverse osmosis or planning for that to remove the salts, right? It's a very complicated, very expensive process, and it really should be the last resort. We strongly believe that it's imperative to start the planning process now and those discussions with the regional board right away. I also want to note that each community is different and there's a variety of strategies that should be explored, especially for the salts. We're working with several agencies dealing with salt limits and employing different strategies, including source control and unfortunately possibly advanced treatment at the city of San Luis Obispo, their new facility that they just spent a lot of money and time on. It's not going to remove the salts, and that they just got hit with salts limits. So that's, you know, redoing work there. Salts minimization plans and groundwater compliance for Napono CSD. And we're also working with the city of Santa Paula on an advanced treatment facility. We have the right experience, we have the right understanding to develop the plan for moving forward at the wastewater treatment plant. I'm going to invite Julie with GSI to talk about groundwater.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for having us. Julie Garofalo, GSI. We're excited to be part of MKN's team to help provide hydrogeology services to support the Water Master Plan effort. GSI, we have longstanding relationships with our clients, including several on-call contracts, one of which is an on-call contract with Fulton District. And because of that, we have unmatched local hydrogeologic knowledge. We are very intimate with the district's water supply system and well system, and we have all the records in-house and know where the wells are and how deep they are, and also the challenges associated with each well site. Those include, groundwater level conditions and what those long-term trends look like, and also water quality challenges that the district faces with some of the groundwater wells. And so our local hydrogeology knowledge allows us to hit the ground running when it comes to water master planning and looking at the condition of the well sites. We're going to do an extensive well condition assessment to support the water master planning effort. That will include visiting each of the well sites and documenting the current conditions of the wellhead, looking for various improvements that are needed, whether it's replacement of flow meters, and various improvements to help the district collect the data for long-term planning. Part of that process also looks at reviewing the data. So we will be submitting an RFI to the district to look at their water production records and look at total capacity and evaluate that to see what the current demands are and if the current capacity meets those demands. And then also looking at future projections and doing future planning. So how many wells will you need to add to your system in the future? Which wells are currently out of service and the reasons that they're out of service? Can they be repaired and fixed, or do we need to plan for future wells? And in the water master plan will also include recommendations for conducting routine well testing. We encountered, that issue on the Platts 4 deep rehab, where we were trying to assess water levels over time and what the minimum water levels are during peak summer demands, and how long can you operate a well before you encounter operational issues with dewatering the well screens. So looking at those long-term records are really important. And the only way to have those records is if the district has the ability to measure water levels. So when we're on these sites, we'll look for access to the wells, and also look at SCADA equipment and seeing if there's any upgrades that are needed to collect the data. So that's it for the hydrogeology.
Julie? All right, last slide. In summary, I just want to say your review team ranked us the most qualified and responsive team. What normally happens is the agency often will negotiate scope with the top ranked firm, and we're ready to do that today. So we can We can talk about scope, we can talk about budget and look at your priorities. Today we've highlighted our very relevant expertise, our local and longstanding experience with the district, and some of the key points of our approach. We listened and responded. So our proposal includes a detailed and full scope of work and the assumptions that were used to build our cost proposal. We're practical. We understand the district might have budget limitations. So we prepared an alternative reduced scope with our original proposal that will still deliver a master plan. We are flexible and we would welcome the opportunity to work with the district and optimize the scope to best align with your key objectives. And with that, I just want to say thanks again for the opportunity, and we're happy to address any questions you might have.
Thank you. We did have a couple questions that we generated earlier, and I think the first one is, and I know I don't want to try to resolve this like today, but can we view the two proposals, because it's kind of what it amounted to, or two options as being, really more like a fluid, like kind of a menu of those things? Can we view that as an option? We could end up somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely. Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's quite typical to go through, rank your top ranked proposer for professional services, and before you even open the cost, select them, and then sit down and negotiate. You don't have to like or accept that very first cost proposal. We can talk about it. We may have made assumptions in our cost proposal that's may need to be clarified. Do you want this much flow meters? Are we gonna put them over here? We assumed for this long, maybe you wanna do 3 periods instead of 2 periods of flow monitoring, something like that. So yeah, you can look at it as a menu, but I would say that some of it naturally need to kind of go hand in hand. Maybe you wouldn't do task 1A and not 1B, for instance.
Sure, understood.
Yeah.
Well, certainly a lot to digest because there's not wildly, but very different approaches between both the proposers. I do see that you guys have an idea of how to execute it. I was curious, just looking at some of your sub-consultants and, some of the roles which they play. I actually know the architect that you have listed here, Charles,
Oh, yeah.
fairly well. I worked with him at a previous company. So from an
Nice.
architecture standpoint, what is it exactly you're doing for an architectural review, and how is that applicable to the master plan? Just kind of curious, because obviously managing more sub-consultants is more people to manage, and that can come with its own challenges. So
Right.
with these items, and actually I'm in B5 and worked with them in the past as well for a different reason, but yeah, just curious, like what your approach is. That, I don't want to have a conversation about comparing these because it's really our discussion with you, but
Fine.
with these different sub-consultants, like are these things that are really, really required? And then, what are they really looking at? Like from an architectural standpoint, what are we looking at?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so a lot of these sub-consultants were selected to respond to specific tasks that were requested in the RFP. So that's including the architecture. I'll jump forward and say, is it really required for a master plan? A lot of them, no. Like you don't necessarily need to do an architectural review. But it was addressing the request. Let's see if I can find it so I don't just shoot from the hip. To review the district's facilities and look at, how much lab space do we have? How much room do we have for lockers and restrooms and everything? Like, what do we need really to support the wastewater facility from an administrative standpoint? And forgive me, it may have been a couple other facilities as well. I'll have to go to it. Yeah, it was reviewing space, looking at operational needs for personnel. And then they were gonna develop a conceptual site floor plan reflecting either required modifications to district buildings or construction of new facilities, depending on kind of where they landed with that staffing need. So it's very like high level, but it's a way to program in, oh, hey, we need a new treatment plant. And by the way, we're gonna need a whole new admin building rather than doing it down the road during design and then you don't have the budget included in that initial budget. So that's,
Essentially creating like bridging documents that you could use for future designs or, you know, layouts, right?
it's a planning document, yeah. So it's, your master plan is, you know, if you're familiar with design and construction, it sounds like.
Yeah, the building on
Yes.
his resume we built.
Yeah, so it's pre 30% concept design. So
Yeah,
your master plan is like even
SDs.
earlier, high level. But it's doing all those analyses and evaluations to say, okay, what's our design criteria? Are we looking at 2 MGD or 3 MGD? Are we looking at half an MGD or?
And really, we asked for a lot, which is why we ended up with a lot of subconsultants on this proposal, but, in this case, we were looking for like placeholders for what those costs would be so that we could factor those into future rate and or impact fee studies, so we could begin to accrue money so they could be implemented at a future date. And so right now, we don't have that. We don't know what kind of cost we need to factor into this sort of this is sort of the wastewater plant is also the location of our corporation yard, if you will, for lack of a better word. So that's where all of the field staff reports to work, and, you know, even if they're not working even if they're not conducting a wastewater specific task.
Absolutely, and these guys all know a lot better than me. I've been in the Templeton area a couple of years and I've been on this committee going on my second year, so, and I'm not a water expert by any stretch of the imagination, so one of these days I might get to go tour all of them. So the only other real question I have is, you have what I would do too, this is what we recommend to do all these things, here's a reduced version of that. Your
Yeah.
schedule with that is this, it looks like we only have one baseline schedule in here. That's assuming everything was selected, and do you have a rough date if for some reason that we went with the reduced option one of what that schedule would look like?
I don't have that date, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it's relatively consistent with what we laid out, because we are still recommending in our base scope of work that you do that flow monitoring
Yeah,
to calibrate your sewer model. And that's really setting the critical path for the analysis. So I think a lot of those other optional tasks, if you wanted to include some or all of them, could be done, would be done within that earlier period while and that's even a guesstimate. So I talked with Henry about it, and we're thinking we could even possibly accelerate it. It depends on wet weather. So your flow monitoring, you want to do a dry weather season, you want to do a wet weather season. Some areas that have like high tourists, which is not necessarily Templeton, I guess, but they also have a peak dry weather season, right? Where you have a huge influx. So we look at plant records and look at where we think we're going to do that flow monitoring. And as we're getting close, we'd have our sub stand ready. Like, we're going to go deploy, we're expecting a big storm, in the next week. So our schedule that we laid out is a little bit conservative, I'd say, on the long side, because we're saying we're not going to start that flow monitoring in January.
yeah,
We can start as early as October, November, depending on what our season looks like. Yeah.
absolutely. Well, it's very well done proposal, so.
Thank you.
Questions for?
The flow monitoring, was that included in the reduced scope? Looks like 5G. Looks like it was.
This should be.
Okay, yeah, so I think that was just our major question, were you guys open to doing some sort of hybrid negotiation of these tasks and narrowing it down to what we believe are priorities,
Yes.
and coming to an agreement? And that'll help us in this, follow-up discussion of like, where the committee and the board ends up wanting to go with the budget, because we obviously are over our budgeted amount of 142,000.
Right.
So there will, be a discussion on that
Yeah.
level with the board, so. I don't have anything further. I think it was very, very well, very, very comprehensive and answered a lot of what we had in the RFP, so I really appreciate that effort.
Well, one more thing, in addition to that negotiation, are you willing to, let's say we go, hey, this is what we can get right now. Put these items in as alternates in the contract so that if for some reason they do find more money or something comes up, that we're locked into these rates and we're able to go execute that work in a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be very upfront and say that, it kind of depends. It depends on what that is.
Sure.
We've put together, what we think is needed with today's rates. And as you know, those are changing on an annual basis typically, right?
Yeah.
I will say that our rates are very competitive for this area. If you compare some of our top staff and those rates compared to others, and I invite you to compare with any others, it's very competitive, it's very comparable, and in a lot of cases, it's much less. So it depends on what it is. I can't control all our subs.
Of course.
We're constantly being kind of reassessed annually, but maybe the time, we would talk about the timing. We have done 3-year contracts before. But typically with professional services, you allow for a rate increase on an annual basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
if you don't have any more specific questions for MKN, I think the next step is for the community to kind of discuss what we brought for you and make see if maybe you can reach some consensus about how you want to move forward. If we're going to do that, it probably makes sense since WSC said they wanted to wait around. Let them know. That's okay too.
Billy? No, they're coming on in.
So again, I think I want to just step back just for a second and just highlight what I think we have. We issued this RFP. We included a lot of things that we're, to make it as comprehensive as possible in the RFP, and that's probably why we ended up with a lot of variety in terms of both the approaches and the proposals with these various options or menu of items to determine or address those kind of broader or things that are outside the sort of infrastructure specific desires. And it sounds like under both consultants, there's some picking and choosing that can be done to help us meet our budget. We did receive 3 proposals. We scored as again, just to reiterate what you've been already told, we scored the proposals without review of the costs and advanced the 2 top scoring firms to this stage, and then included the costs. I think we have more information now, particularly on the WSC one than we had once we opened those costs. There was some confusion at the staff level about, how could we make this work, because there were elements that were missing from their base proposal that we thought were essential, and maybe also in the case of MKN's or sort of baseline proposal that we think are probably essential. Are you prepared to kind of give us some guidance about, do you feel like there's a preferred approach or preferred group to move forward with?
I kind of like what you just outlined, and I mean, I'm probably the worst one on this board that doesn't understand any of it, so, I want water, I turn on the faucet and flush the toilet, and that's about my expertise. So, I mean, from what I have read of the proposals from I've heard here today, I mean, I am actually ready to say which one I prefer, to go with. So I like, we've talked on a number of our committee meetings about the proposal and what we're doing, and I kind of go on with what we've decided. And again, I appreciate you all out there for submitting your proposals, and I'll let the people that have more knowledge on this than I do. So it's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, from my side, I'd definitely take a look right now as MCAM is scoring the highest out of the proposals. So I do have a little preference on that side of the scoring possibility. I think WSC's proposal is absolutely comprehensive and there's fantastic elements to it. But once again, I'm not also a water person too. And I think within that scoring section, I score within that proposal does provide some illumination on how we might proceed.
Well, they are not, I mean, a lot of apples and apples, but a little bit of apples and oranges. I think that WC has higher rates. The rates of the other proposal are, from what I can tell, from a first glance, and it seems obviously with, I don't have your acronyms in MKN or what's the?
Yeah,
Yep.
MKN.
So with that being said, both have here we go, it seems a good understanding, but as just looking at a high level for rates and consultants, obviously you get what you pay for. MKN has is a higher cost, but I believe that the engagement from the sub-consultants and the team that they put together seems more complete. I don't think that, WC is not necessarily an incomplete. I'd be curious that I didn't ask, but if there were different quotes within that, but from what I can tell, it seems that there's, if you can get to a solid negotiation to get within or as close to the amount of money that the district has to be able to execute that work, I think that you get what you pay for. You're gonna get more people, which can create more problems, but can also create more support within that. It's a little bit longer schedule and it looks like a little bit more detail up front. I am risk adverse, especially with the way that the state's changing. So I would like to go. I favor the approach of getting all the data that you need now to be able to successfully meet the requirements as they stand, or at least predict what they're gonna be. So I think both did well, but I at this time, I know a little bit about water, but and I know a lot about construction. I know the people in there. I do think that it would be if you can get to the right dollar amount, and it makes sense from a strategic business point, that I would be in favor of MKN in this discussion. So.
Well, I just wanted to clarify a couple things. One, I think what the information that we had available at the date of the proposals might have made it look like the MCAN work was, the WSC work was a little less costly. And you're right, it's difficult to truly come up with to get to an apples to apples. But since we got the pricing on the optional thing, it's probably much closer dollar amount.
Sure.
The two different ways of getting there. The way I guess, I think we looked at this again internally this morning and said, really, we didn't have these final costs. We didn't have the optional costs from WSC until just now, but we started out with a slightly higher budget a couple years ago. We started spending some of that money on some baseline information or some information to feed the master plans. And so what's left is this smaller amount of around $140,000. I think what we're looking at here today says we can't get what we thought, or what we wanted for $140,000. I think based on just ballparking it, again, back of the napkin math, not final numbers. If we could get to a budget of about $300,000, we could get the most important components of the master plan complete, and we might have to defer some of those things that are a little less related or tackle those sort of separately. But if the committee was to make a recommendation on either, for either consultant, we're gonna seek, like, can we work with either one and try to get to a budget of somewhere around $300,000? And then come forward with a proposal, maybe with some additional options, but that $300,000 is probably about what it takes to get to what we think met our baseline needs, our core needs, when we called this a master plan
Sure.
goal. So, and I think we could probably do so either, I mean, I don't know, we're just talking here, but with either firm about, with that dollar amount, but it's about double what we have currently approved. So the committee would need, committee's recommendation, in addition to which consultant to begin to negotiate this with, is to also understand or be prepared to recommend that we need to increase our budget, be prepared to engage on a somewhere around a $300,000 level. I don't want my hands tied to that number exactly, because maybe it's 302, or maybe it's 298, or maybe it's 305, with a few options that we can consider as we, make some progress here. But it's, about double what we had included in the budget. That's my fault. We had a placeholder figure. We started spending some of that money down. We didn't update that last year when the budget was done. We knew these costs had gone up really rapidly over the last 5 or so years. Really rapidly.
What kind of recommendation are you looking for? Cause we gonna have to recommend to the board to make a decision.
So
I mean, I'd be ready to make a recommendation that we take both these plans, submit them to the board with our recommendation for MKM at this point, but then it's gonna be more discussion at the board meeting.
yeah, I think before we would have this go before the board, we need to work with whoever the preferred consultant is to narrow this, to tighten the scope and have a more specific budget, so we're not coming in with big swings. I mean, both consultants have provided us with like options that take the budget and nearly double it. So either way, or more so in one case. So we probably need to, now that we have this, if there's a preferred consultant, we need to spend some time with them, kind of come up with an agreement, something that's sort of in the middle here, that we think meets all the core needs. And it doesn't take away the option of pursuing additional tasks down the road necessarily, but so that when the board considers this, they really know what they're gonna get.
So does this committee have the authority to pick one and let you work with them and only take one to the board?
Well, I think that we would still take the fact that we got multiple proposals and multiple cost estimates. The board can still choose not to award the consulting services agreement. But right now, we don't have one that's
I
ready
mean,
for.
I'm fine with what you're proposing. I just don't know how to make the recommendation like this.
I'd actually like to take a step back. Lori and Justin understand this system much better. I'd actually like to really hear your thoughts on both the proposals to maybe help have that, solidify that conversation. So I really do think you spent the most time on this, I would assume, and I'd really like to hear your thoughts on these, on the proposals and the cost, and get a little bit more data.
Right, so I'll just jump in for a small amount. I kind of knew when we were going into this RFP process that we were a little low on our budget, so I anticipated it being higher. So I knew we were gonna be looking at a budget adjustment or possibly incorporate into this next year's budget, this change. But we were kind of trying to understand, the things that the extra items outside of what would be considered like a more traditional master plan effort. We were like, well, we need these items. We're kind of behind in issuing or addressing these items, so we want to put them in there. But there was a little bit of like, I don't know how like absolutely necessary it is that they be within the master plan effort. Some of them, yes, we do want them, such as the assessment of the wastewater treatment plant and options for us to address the upcoming regulations. That was one that was like higher on the list. And so I'm kind of open to negotiating what we believe is like a priorities and need to be within this main base master plan and what we could defer. I will say there are a couple projects that are listed on our budget right now that if we do some of them within the master plan, those project budgets will go down slightly, like the urban water management plan we are slated to do in the next year. Some of this effort will offset that effort and project that's required this year. So there's things like that where I kind of understood that, you know, we have this base effort or this traditional master plan effort, and then we have these extra things that we put in there because we have them on our list of things we wanted to address. So, in my opinion, MKN addressed all of those items the most complete and the most comprehensive way. And gave us an idea of like, you know, what's the level of effort needed, for that, like amount of hours. And so that's helpful to me. Because it gives us an idea of, here's the whole menu of options and what we can have. And if we go up to 300,000, for example. So that was, you know, if you look at the ranking,
Yeah.
we did have a ranking in
Yeah, I
there,
looked at
so it was my highest ranked proposal for that reason.
Yeah, there's, so to that, there's even mention, I believe there's mention to, discussion with the Regional Water Control Board and, with the general permit. And that's another kind of side project that we've been, as a placeholder in our budget. When needed, we would be able to, I believe that's $45,000 that we've been moving year after year when we get into those negotiations. We're hoping that, possibly some of those negotiations, some of those meetings would be had as a part of this project as well. From the proposal, it's noted, at least in MKN's, proposal, I believe, if memory serves me right. So the ratings, they spoke to the general feeling of how staff, how staff took a long time to draft out an RFP that encompasses quite a bit, and there is substantial costs associated with all of those things. Both consultants lent to this flexibility as well with those scopes, those items and time frame to accomplish. I do appreciate not just taking those line items at face value, but if staff were allowed to discuss these items with the consultants, digging into them. Maybe on flow monitoring, we would change how many places we're gonna do flow monitoring. Maybe we would increase. And so then you do have those costs, decrease perhaps. But I appreciate that flexibility and that open-mindedness. I appreciate that open-mindedness and objective evaluation of how to deal with our treatment plant in the future, Templeton's, the communities, wastewater treatment plant in the future. And so, again, going back to the time, putting together the RFP, Lori, thank you for getting that out, and addendums. MPN delivered that comprehensive master plan, touched on, even if there's a lesser scope, touched on all of the elements that were noted in the RFP, and that stood out to us, and I think that's reflected in the ratings from staff.
No, I appreciate that. And, I just want to make sure that for what I can do is just understand, you guys understand this the best. You've spent a lot of time on it. I think there's a lot of complexities to this, and, I don't think it's an easy proposal to respond to. I think there's you guys did a hell of a job just trying to navigate all the information and data. And, I think that, from a recommendation standpoint, I don't know how all the budgeting for the community services district works and where your money's at and how you move that around. Obviously, you gotta get more money to do this. Doesn't surprise me. There's lots of times I bid work and they're like, it should be $1 million, and then everyone turns out $4 million proposal, you know, and it's like, sometimes it's challenging, especially with the complexity, so, you know, from a recommendation standpoint, I guess it's his point is, how do we provide, you know, because at the end of the day, the board should be able to look at the data, and you guys need to make that decision. Obviously, this is just a recommendation to that. You guys have already done a great job reviewing the data, the information, and looking at it in a way that created a structure around the points in the system. Obviously, if we just look at if the pricing is truly comparable, and maybe just something to look at, you figure out a way to create more of an apples to apples dollar amount, just to have a really like linear way to look at it before you make your final decision. I don't know if there's a way to get the people who provided the proposals to get something a little bit more like, you know, A to B, or A to A, B to B, C to C. I'm not saying you need to do that, but it might be nice for an exercise just to truly look at each line item in a way that, but I don't know if they're too complex to truly have something that linear. But if you wanted just a little bit more information on that, because that would help you in your thoughts around what you need to select and what you don't, because obviously there's gonna be a big negotiation. Before you enter in that negotiation, it would be really important just to make sure that the pricing does align. I think from a skill point and a proposal point, obviously one ranked higher, and I don't know that it's worth more time and effort to do that. I'm not saying that. I think I trust staff. Staff's done a great job. I think the dollar amounts to your point with the options. I haven't looked at them all one-to-one, try to see if they all actually say the same thing. But to that point, if the dollar amount's roughly the same, I would defer to the staff's recommendation, and then I would defer to, you continue to defer to staff's recommendation about how to find the money and what that dollar amount looks like to get what you need. I hope that's helpful in a way.
Well, let me try to, go ahead.
I mean, again, I don't disagree with anything that I've heard, but I would say go ahead and move forward, and it's up to the staff to decide exactly how they want to do this, but until we find out what we're talking about in dollars, we're not gonna be able to send it to the board anyway, so I think you need to.
So I guess, is there concurrence, I mean, we would not have brought forward both the consultants unless we thought either one of them could do the job.
Understood.
Very well.
Yeah.
So that's, you could, you know, that based on the proposals received. Our scoring did indicate MKN received a higher score, of the three that we received, the highest score, that we received. I don't think it's gonna be possible to do a true line item comparison in costs, because there's different approaches here.
Sure.
But in the big picture, and by the way, you do not need to make this decision based solely on cost. You need to be able to defend it to your constituents and the ratepayers that you're not wasting their resources when they complain about water rates or.
Well, I'm gonna complain. We're not just kidding.
I think there's some validity to both proposals and optionals and into that idea, but we have limitations when it comes down to cash flow.
Yeah.
And we should really have the individuals reevaluate the proposals, try to identify which ones are the highest priority, and then evaluate costing on that to bring before the board to say, yes, it's inadequate at 100. The adequacy, is it 300,000? Is it 220,000? You know, what is going to be ideal for it? One of the thoughts I have too is if we're looking at, you know, the 5 and 10-year plans on things, are some of these things able to be wrapped up, where we can take funding proposals in the future to add to the current, you know, funding that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that again, back to, we should have done a better job of producing a better cost estimate. We let our desire of the scope of this to kind of creep and include a bunch of other things and never added those to the budget. And so that's partly why there's a big difference between what's left in the budget and what you have here. I'm not, I mean, I fully expected the proposals to come in over budget. And I'll take that's on me. And when we bring this back to the board, I think we'll say we went through a competitive process. These are, the costs here are in the big picture, not all that different one way or the other. In the big picture, if the committee essentially directs us to, hey, we think that staff should work with MKN and refine the scope, narrow this down, use the options as sort of a menu, and come up with something that we think meets the core needs of the district for the master plan. And then, you know, we can explain in that process, you know, why we either didn't choose certain tasks or, you know, think we could put off certain tasks from that effort. That's something we can do. I don't think there's any, I don't think it should come before the board until we have something that's, you know, far more specific. And then the board can elect to proceed.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that you gotta get it more refined and, you know, just from a rate fee and a markup fee, that just one more thing to add is the rates seem to be, I believe, dollar for dollar, you will get more hours on the project with MKN, and you're saving 5% on sub-consultancies, cause WSC was a 15% markup versus a 10% markup, so things to consider. Just one more, that was my one more thing to add to it, is I think you're gonna get more effort for your dollars, whatever those dollars end up being, based on just that preliminary data.
Okay, so is there consensus? We've got the team in the room here, consensus to staff work with MKN to refine the scope and then bring that forward to the board. And of course, the board would get the same information in terms of the WSC proposal that we received another proposal from Blackwater, although it wasn't as highly scored. And then at that time, once that's revised, the board can decide, knowing fully that, look, this is gonna exceed the amount of money that we have currently budgeted for.
I believe so.
Yeah, we can, you know, it's a high priority for the district, and
And you can have this for us in a week.
unlikely.
Close of business tomorrow.
Well, I think we were talking about second meeting,
Yeah, we're hoping to have this back before the board in May.
yeah, second meeting in May is more probably the
Closer
most
enough.
realistic, so
So
obviously we
you
have
have
to.
to have another meeting, right, or no?
I don't think.
Oh, you
No.
were, no, we were hoping that you guys would be okay with us continuing to the board
Yes.
with that whole, you know, we were talking about that $300,000.
That was sort of just sort
That's
of.
what we kind of want to buy in on as well, if possible.
I think refining the scope and also looking at the costing and.
Yeah.
We can already look at the total scope and total costs, but that refinement of it and saying these are the priorities is gonna be far more effective towards the board.
Go to the board, okay,
Okay, well, I wanna just, you know, really thank the effort that went in. It's you, it took us a lot of effort just to come up with the requests for proposals. Putting these proposals together from these businesses takes a ton of time. They have to understand our work. And I think, you know, we're really appreciative that we had such qualified consulting firms submit proposals on them. And I hope that everybody remains engaged with the district and available for future work, whether they're selected now or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Next on agenda is the Platte Steep Well rehabilitation update.
Well, we
guys don't have to
didn't
say-
ask Julie to give this.
Yeah, no one hears
Since
that.
she's on, she might be on MKN's block. I'm never gonna turn down an opportunity to ask her.
Thank you all.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
We'll
Thank
be
you.
in-
Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, talk
Thank
soon.
you guys, appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I'll jump in and Justin can add to or whatever. So as you know, Julie's been great at helping us through this process, and her work plan, that we went out to, we didn't end up going out for RFP, but we just went out for request for proposals for different drillers to move forward with the work plan that she came up with kind of this idea that, if we do what's called, air swab airlifting. If we do this process to redevelop the well, then it will clear up of the sand that we were seeing last summer. So last summer, June, we turned on Platts Fort Deep. After about a week of operating, it started producing sand, excessive amounts of sand that went into the distribution system. We had to do, quite a bit of an effort to clean that up. Traced it to the well, and it's been out of operation since then. There were multiple steps to kind of diagnose it. Then we came up with this work plan, and then we hired Pacific Coast Drilling to go ahead with this effort. So they started in probably late February, and more recently in the last couple of weeks, we've concluded the air swabbing or the air lifting, and it has significantly improved the well. We are looking at kind of borderline turbidity levels below the required amount. We still are seeing a little bit of sand being produced. So we've started discussions of including what's called a sand separator on the other side of this well to take out that's little bit of sand that we're still seeing. We've actually, when we went on a tour of Tastegro Mutual Water Company's well field, they actually have these on almost all of their wells. So they actually experience some sand as well. So we have some information from them on what they use and whatnot. So we're also looking at converting this well from a turbine driven pump to a submersible. It's our last well that is the turbine driven, and it's much preferred on an operational site to have it be submersible. So that's now in discussion about how we're going to finish the rehabilitation of this well, and kind of walk in that, having it be submersible and this sand separator, and also how it's going to interact with the future river well on that site for blending. And so overall, we're really, happy about how the process has gone. There are some tests currently happening to see what's kind of ideal. And maybe you can speak to this better, because I've been here the last couple of meetings about the ideal like gallons per minute to pump at so that we don't produce sand. So is that 450? Is that 500? Finding, doing some tests to see are there certain levels where we're starting to produce more. There has been the issue of that at startup. There's some sand that has been produced that it clears up. So we run it for 10 minutes to waste, and then it clears up, or do we have, some operational stuff that we need to figure out? So that's going on right now. We're also going to do some water testing to figure out if there's any issues with water quality and where those are. And that effort will kind of speak to the water quality of all our wells and what's kind of typical. So that's where we're at right now. They're looking to conclude, say, in the next month or so. And then from there, we'll have to move into phase 2, which is the actual new pump well column, and for possibly the sand separator, and getting this thing going for moving into summer production.
So, yeah, so I think the message is mostly really good news, right? We knew there was some risk that we would go through this effort and we wouldn't be able to rehabilitate the well sufficiently to get it back into service. It looks like we're gonna have options of getting it back into service. I just want to point out on the sand and the turbidity, our goal is not to get it just to meet minimum standards, but rather to get it to the point where our customers don't see a change in water quality, a significant change in water quality when that well goes on. This has historically been a very high producing well. We're very reliant on it during peak summer season. And in the northern part of the district, it's the primary water source that customers receive. So if the water quality changes, they notice it. Because it doesn't reach a blending. That water in the peak summer months hits the distribution system. It doesn't really reach these tanks and such. It would overnight, but during the peak demand periods, it reaches just that northern part of the district. And so our goal would be to try to get the well back online with water quality that doesn't shock the customer every time the well comes on and off.
just for my own knowledge here, which I guess this is, if the well, after you do this magic that you do and it now produces less turbidity water, and then you put a submersible pump and that's, you know, you gotta run it for 10 minutes and it's really, really clear. What is the option of just keeping that one on and running and then maybe turning down something else that doesn't have that startup issue? I'm not saying that that's a thing, I just was curious, like, hey, this one, you gotta run it for 30 minutes and waste water and we're turning it on and off, you know, every couple of weeks or whatever. It's like, well, why don't you just run that one and then the one that doesn't have that issue, turn it down?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not an expert, but that seems like a thing that you could do.
Yeah, it is. Operationally, that's exactly what we're looking at. And this testing that's happening and sampling,
Mhm.
that's an analysis that's being performed. After we get on the other side of this, it's gonna point, all of that data, that information is gonna come together and point us towards how we're gonna operationally run that facility compared with other facilities. Platts is a key well in our portfolio in summertime.
Yeah,
But we can fire up a well like Fortini or Bonita, north end of town, and that's gonna help out if we're running Platts deep at a lower gallon per minute, a GPM. And we turn up Fortini and Bonita. We were just having these conversations here very recently, and we're heading in the right direction. I mean, this is really positive. Julie, initially during assessments and the investigation of what happened at Platts Deep, came up with this action plan. We've been moving forward with that action plan, and things have been headed in the right direction. Early on, as Jeff mentioned, it could have been, never mind, let's scrap this site and let's build a whole new well, right, at exceptional expense. And fortunately, things have been headed in the right direction. Now we're in that pump testing side of things, sampling, constant rate sampling was just conducted on Friday, and we're awaiting a result of that bill. But those things will be absolutely considered operationally, how we're gonna run that facility in the future to make sure that our customers have a high quality water at the end of the day.
if this fix works, which it looks like it does, what's the risk of it happening again? Like, are you gonna have to do this fancy thing that you talk about every year? Or is it gonna be something that you can do, it's gonna be well, obviously you don't know because you'll have to see, but is that a risk you are running by doing this? My guess is it's significantly cheaper than drilling a new well, but if you gotta do it every 6 months or a year, what's that look like? And I'm just asking questions, because obviously you're
Yeah,
the
no,
fact
that
finding.
is not really our hope at all.
Yeah,
yeah, of course.
Julie can probably address how often we might have to do it again, but it's taken a whole year, so we can't do it every year.
Well, there was.
I'm just curious.
There was some question about the original, what they call the original development of the well, and Julie obviously is expert on this, but when you originally develop a well, there's different methods, and, as time has gone on, well drillers have gotten better at doing this so that they don't have these issues that develop over time with either sanding or water quality or whatnot. So, the original well was it 2009 when it was done, and we have very little records on it. So that's one thing that's changed a little bit now, especially with Justin and I being here, is that we want, comprehensive, how do we approach this thing to get our best product? So in 2009, when it was developed, it might not have had those more recent technologies in well development that led us where we are now. We did have to do column pipe replacement in 2013.
Yep.
Maybe because of materials choice or something was degrading early. Now there's been some discussion about the fact that it had a turbine pump and some drawdown issues that may have contributed to this. So there's different things where, in the original development, questions that could have been made at that time that might have led us where we are today. All to say is, now this is the latest technology, from what I understand, of how to develop a well with how we've approached it. And so really, it's the best that we could have done to develop it. So it wouldn't have a future issue, so.
Yeah, absolutely, I was
I
just
guess
curious.
that's a big question mark.
Yeah, you
If the
don't
well-
know.
If the well could fail or.
You're right, and that was definitely in the conversation at the meeting as well, is that as we're turning this facility back on, let's make sure that it's on for for a we get the life expectancy out of this rehab and pump replacement that the district and the community, deserves. So we do this the right way.
Yeah, I'm sure it's premature for that. I like knowing
Yeah,
things, and that was
yeah.
a fun thing to know.
It
and,
is.
Yeah.
I guess fun wouldn't be the right word.
Yeah, I just wanna say, what's been going on now is addressing what, maybe was a deficiency in the original development. It's essentially fixing that, so it's not gonna have to get done over and over.
I'm sure that it's a process. I don't understand the process. Sounds like you put new sleeves inside the pipe to put a different material down there, and then you did something else with it, and you're putting a new pump. So you've now essentially retrofitted it to meet the requirements and bring it up to the standard of the way that we drill them now, I guess.
That may be a future agenda item.
Sure.
After, on the other side of the rehab, Julie, is
Yeah.
going through like a PowerPoint of what happened, what did we do? Yeah. Yeah.
Success story.
The success story, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing that's interesting about wells is that they do not have an infinite lifespan.
Oh,
They fail for a lot of reasons, and this one here looks like we're gonna be able to get back into service, so that's good.
That's awesome. I appreciate the data.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We only have 9 more well-related items.
Yeah.
That's it.
The last item on the agenda is future agenda items.
We had already had one future agenda item that we were tracking. That's the review of the water buffer policy with some potential consideration of either changes or modifications to the assumptions. At your last meeting, which I believe was in late February, you stated that you would schedule that review at today's meeting, not actually review it, but schedule a review at today's meeting. So we're prepared to hopefully schedule the next meeting, and then we've done some internal work. We don't need a whole lot of additional time to be ready, so we could whenever you schedule another meeting, if we could do so right now, we should be ready to facilitate that discussion. There was some interest in getting that done sooner than later.
Yes.
So
So that's not gonna create, directives to Justin.
And as Jeff mentioned, we have already met and discussed different alternatives, options with the buffer model as well. And so we could.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. We could hit the ground running. We could.
yeah, I think we wanted to get our ducks in a
Yeah,
row,
we already have.
just in case some options, so.
for like-
So why don't you just tell us when you're, we can go through some dates and say, well, how soon do you wanna meet? Obviously the meeting itself is some time commitment, but otherwise, I don't think it'll take a lot of time to be prepared for it. 30th, like in 2 weeks, 30th? I've got it
Pretty open.
on the 30th. In the how about, if we could do it in the morning, it'd be easy for me. I've got a water sales meeting at 2. If it's not gonna take forever, I could do it after that as well. But I've got a flight to Florida that night.
Well, about the 6th.
The day of the meeting.
Board meeting,
The board meeting.
well, right now we have a board meeting scheduled for the 6th, but I don't have any items on it. I don't wanna commit that it'll be canceled because
I am changing jobs, and I took a week off between those jobs.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So from the 5th to the 9th, I am unemployed. Well,
so does that mean you're just staying and hanging out at home, or you're gonna go somewhere?
nope, I just took a week off just to not work for a week. I'm gonna do nothing. I don't know.
If you want a utilities tour, just.
I actually was
sign up
gonna have a
for
conversation with you about that. That is-
I was talking about June.
All day on the 9th.
Yeah,
I
me
was
too. Both
Talking
those.
about June 6th,
Oh, June.
a week after the 30th. Were you talking about the 30th of March?
He was talking about 30th of April, I believe.
April, okay, I'm all out of it, okay.
Well, I just saying,
Well, that week is good. I mean, the 8th.
actually, May 9th, I do fly to
So late
Portland.
afternoon or all day
But,
on the ninth?
8th or 9th? What do you, how about the 8th in the afternoon?
The 8th would be totally good.
8th in the afternoon?
Eighth, yeah.
8th?
8th of what?
May.
September.
I know.
So at least we can have the meeting on the sixth, let them know that it's going onto the agenda for the eighth. Then
I
bring
think that, yeah, from
It's
what
the
I
8th,
gathered.
well, I think we're just waiting for Wayne's confirmation on the 8th, see if that would work.
buy you coffee.
I'll try, wow, I've got a lot of personal stuff. Great grandbaby and
Yeah, congratulations.
all that good stuff, so I'll try to get it on the 8th.
Well, do you want to tentatively set this on the 8th and then we can
3
confirm?
o'clock on the eighth.
3 o'clock? Do you want to call that tentative and then we can get some confirmation like in a week or something?
Just go ahead and do it.
Okay,
Okay.
3 p.m.
So it's a Thursday, we wanna do it Thursday.
That sounds good to
Not
me,
the
give me
Wednesday.
something to do.
Okay.
But to that point, I was, while I was sitting here, I'm like, I really need to go see all these things, you know? Yeah, well,
You know, I mean, this, I mean, you could, if that's a committee request, we could facilitate a committee tour as well at some.
it doesn't have to be, I think it'd be, I don't think you need to drag everyone, unless they wanna come, I think that I would be
We've
happy.
taken Eric on
I
there,
have.
cause he just joined
You
recently.
have one.
Taking
Yeah, I
two
sure.
places,
But
but I'm
I-
always more than welcome to go.
Yeah, I'd be more than welcome to do it again.
Do you want to try to fold that in on that same day?
I won't be free until 3 o'clock.
Okay, but after that,
After that, I'll be free.
I mean, like, if we can, I don't know that this doesn't probably need to take hours.
No.
Right.
Either item, I think that,
The wastewater treatment plan and maybe Creekside would be.
Yeah.
The big ones that we want.
May
No, I need every well,
I'm like,
every meter,
We'll go until we're.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll tell them.
I need to turn on every spigot in the park. Just-
Oh, the park's a
Okay,
whole
3
nother-
p.m.
a whole nother.
We're gonna do, we'll start the meeting here and then we'll finish with a short tour.
Perfect,
Great,
awesome,
thank you.
thank you.
Once again,
that
thank
was
you
fun.
much.
Yeah.
It's weird talking about people not selecting in the front of them, of course, you know, that's.
Well, they were, yeah, they